Hey YouTube, this is Rasmussen Park Fan 62. Now, on this channel, I talk a lot about WWE, but this time I am going to talk about AEW, and this is me more criticizing it. Um, in October of 2019, when it first got launched, it went to head to head with NXT. Now, here's the thing: when it first got launched, from October of 2019, even through the pandemic era, it still was the alternative to WWE. It was still getting around the million viewer mark around every week or close to it. Um, but over the last, let's say, year ish, this is where things have started to take a turn for the worst. Now, the first big thing is, as we all know, way too many ex WWE talent. Now, to name a few, you have Miro, formerly known as Rusev in WWE, Lana, or CJ Perry, formerly known as Lana in WWE. You have Ruby Soho, formerly known as Ruby Riot. Um, and there's many others in there. Now, the newest one that's been, well, the two newest ones that have been added to that mix has been Ric Flair and Adam Copeland, formerly known as Edge in WWE. Now, putting Adam Copeland aside for a minute, I find it kind of ironic that Tony Khan would criticize Vince McMahon for something that happened years ago, but then he would hire somebody that was criticized for doing something similar. So it seems like an oxymoron that he would do something like that. Now, with Adam Copeland, that was kind of more of a his decision type deal. Now, the next problem is them having three shows. Now, I'm not saying WWE is not spread thin with their shows because they got Raw, SmackDown, NXT, Main Event, NXT Level Up. So that's basically four shows right in there. But the thing is, at least with WWE, they try and do what they can with the talent that they have. The main problem with AEW is they have Dynamite, Rampage, and Collision. The problem has been one, Rampage is taped after Collision, or Dynamite, I'm sorry. But the main problem has been a lot of the times, unless it's something that has been announced ahead of time, a lot of people don't know and they usually leave right after Dynamite. Which leads me into this. Recently, excluding All in London, England in August, a lot of their shows have been in somewhat empty arenas. Now, for those people who have been posting pictures of empty WWE arenas, that's in the past. The biggest one was when SmackDown was SmackDown Live. But the next biggest problem has been how they have treated the women's division. The women's division seems to be an afterthought a lot of the time. And it's crazy to think that because they have some talented women on their roster, people like Julia Hart, Sky Blue, um, what's her name? Abandon, um, and all these other women. But the problem is, most of the time, it's only a select few who get the screen time. So people right now, most of the people right now who's getting the screen time has been Toni Storm, who is currently the champion. Julia Hart, who just won the TBS championship not long ago. Kiera Hogan, Abandon, I think that's her name, just started appearing on the screen again. Um, and there are a few others, but the main problem has been how they have been booked. And someone like Thunder Rosa, who has heavily criticized how the women's division has been booked. I don't blame her, to be honest, because the women's division is a joke at this point. Well, I'm not saying WWE's women's division is a lot better. I'm saying that at least with the women's division, they have been booked properly. So the women's division has main evented Raws, main evented SmackDown, main evented NXTs, main evented premium live events. And with the women's division AEW, they're lucky to get any screen time on the show. Typically, most of the time when they have something, even a match, it's either halfway through the show or toward the end of the show. And then you have like the timeless Tony segments, which are starting to become somewhat repetitive. And it's all these other things. And it's just like the way they have been booked is astonishing. The closest I've heard that has been booked somewhat properly has been the women's division and Ring of Honor. But the problem is, I don't know how many people watch Ring of Honor because it's taped, one, after Collision, and two, it's on something you have to pay extra for. So, it's one of those things that makes you just kind of go, why are you doing this? The next thing has been the constant hiring of a lot of New Japan Pro Wrestling talent and so forth. Now, while I am not saying hiring New Japan Pro Wrestling talent is a bad thing, I'm just saying they've hired some good New Japan wrestlers and have hired some not so good New Japan Pro wrestlers. I forgot his name, but he just does not look that good at all. Now back to the whole WWE thing. One person who I honestly can say who should not be wrestling or even standing for that matter is Paul White, formerly known as The Big Show. If you saw when he came out on the November 1st episode of Dynamite, it literally looked like his legs were almost going to buckle in. And I didn't notice it when I was there, but I noticed it in videos after that. Honestly, I hate to say it, but he's better as a commentator than he is doing that. Which leads me into this. Overbooking certain wrestlers. Now, one of the things that made MJF, Maxwell Freeman Jr. or something like that, unique was the fact when he would wrestle, it would be a big thing. So he would only wrestle around 1 to 2 times per month. And he was, the heel the heelish character, who would do anything to win. But since he turned face, he's been put in all these weird scenarios. He's wrestling about 4 to 5 times a month. And it's just like, okay, what are you doing with him? I mean, on the November 1st episode of Dynamite, he wrestled with The Acclaimed and Daddy Ass. Okay. Putting aside that, he's also been teamed with Adam Cole, who's currently out with an injury for God knows how long. The main problem is, with him being injured, you're putting all your marbles, or all whatever you want to say, into one person. And he's having to defend these titles in different ways. He's having to team up with people like former WWE Samoa Joe, who he currently is feuding with till World's End later this month. And that's one thing that's hurting them, is because they're not having the special of it anymore with him. The next thing is not having a streaming service. Now, streaming services are a big thing these days. So, WWE has one. They supposedly, I think they're on HBO Max and all this other stuff. But the problem is they don't have an AEW specific one. Now, HBO Max may have a certain part of it, but the problem is they just don't have the proper streaming service for it. And so that's one thing that's hurting them, because like a pay-per-view for AEW is around $50 a month. The problem with that is, especially for stuff like All In, All Out, and all of this stuff, is you're having to pay $50 every time. I just don't know how many people wants to pay, $50 here, $50 there, and so forth down the line. And the next thing is Tony Khan not firing people. Okay. Am I saying Tony Khan should go on a firing spree? No. But he needs to know when to let somebody go. So if they're not making the company money, they're not selling merchandise, and so forth. And that is one of the big things. The next is the media scrums. Now, for everybody who listens to Jim Cornette, on his latest episode of, I can't remember if it's The Experience or The Drive-Thru, him and Brian Last listened to Tony Khan's on a media scrum, and he just kept rambling and rambling and rambling. He doesn't get to the point, and it's just so annoying when you have somebody that rambles. Now, am I saying Triple H, when WWE does their media scrums after, gets to the point? No, but I'm saying at least they get to the point a lot quicker. Now, the biggest thing in this has been the amount of people getting injured in AEW. You cannot tell me, oh, this is natural. The main problem is you're having people do all these stunts and so forth that could possibly injure him. Um, like the amount of time you see Jon Moxley, formerly known as Dean Ambrose in WWE, bleed is insane. The amount of times you see stuff like you know, all these hardcore stunts, Darby Allin, doing all these insane stunts and everything. There's going to be a reason why people like Darby Allin may not, be in the wrestling business much longer with these insane stunts that he does, and then these insane stunts that he does outside of the ring, like trying to climb up a mountain. This is the sort of thing Tony Khan needs to get a hold of and be like, okay, save these stunts for, a paying show or something like that. For Jon Moxley, be like, okay, you can only bleed during a pay-per-view or something like that. Because the biggest problem you're going to face bleeding like that is going to be you could catch some sort of, disease regarding, your blood or whatever. And that is something you just don't want to go through. So that is the biggest thing. Now, putting aside a lot of the bland themes, am I saying every wrestler that comes out needs to have a copyrighted theme? No, absolutely not. But there needs to be a point where, you'd be like, okay, you can have a copyrighted theme, you can't. While it may hurt their feelings, the next thing is pushing people like the Young Bucks. The problem with the Young Bucks are, from what I've heard, they're not really well liked backstage. They're not really pushing merchandise like they used to be. There's a reason why people like Cody Rhodes, Jade Cargill, Cora Jade, formerly known as Princess Priscilla, now known as Gigi Dolan in WWE, are not in AEW. And Tony Khan needs to learn, while he is a wrestling mark per se, the main thing is he needs to learn when to stand up and be a wrestling person as far as running a company. There is a difference between running a wrestling company and being a fan. The problem is there's not an in between. That's like me trying to run OVW week in and week out, or me trying to run Impact Wrestling. That's something I really couldn't do because I don't know how to book a wrestling show. And that is the other thing. All the people AEW works with. AEW works with New Japan Pro Wrestling. I believe there may be one or two other Japanese ones. I know they worked with Impact for a while. And the problem is they focus more on AEW side of that deal than it does with that promotion. Now, with New Japan, it's more of, the New Japan side than it is AEW side. And that is the other big thing, is because, you're basically pushing that talent that is not even your specific talent. You're just borrowing them from another company. And there's so many other things. But the problem is, unless Tony Khan learns, you're just going to see more and more of a downfall of AEW coming. And you have to wonder, with their rights coming up with Warner Brothers Discovery soon, how's that going to impact that? Now, the last thing I'm going to end with is this: the constant cursing and stuff like that. Now, am I saying AEW needs to go toward the family route? Absolutely not. But I am saying this: they need to tone down the cursing. While there is a time and a place for having curse words put in, no wrestler needs to have 5 out of whatever words in their promos be curse words. Or having something sexualized like that. Like on an older episode of Dynamite with a rival between Britt Baker and Ruby Soho, she mentioned like somebody, like a broad like you banging somebody in the back. You know, that it makes it sound like someone like Britt Baker is just going to have sex with somebody, with God knows how many people in the back. And that is the big thing, is I don't know how many people would want to show their children that, be like, oh yeah, look at this. The other thing in that too you have to think about is potential sponsors. The sponsors for WWE and AEW are going to be completely different. The sponsors for WWE are more brands people recognize. So like Ruffles, Slim Jims, Snickers, Coca-Cola, stuff like that. Well, with AEW, it's more in the line of stuff like they had a video game for Texas Chainsaw Massacre earlier this year, which they had a death match over, I believe it was. And then that, I forgot what the name of the game was, but it was like, it had like a Chinese feel to it. You know, and that's the big thing. Now, the other thing I'm going to end this with is certain storylines writing the potential mark as far as, is it classy or not. For example, with what happened going into um, their last pay-per-view between Swerve Strickland and I forgot the other guy's name, with Swerve Strickland going into his house and throwing a t-shirt onto a baby, supposedly that was there, and cutting a promo. And then during their Texas death match, you know, the blood drinking spot. Like, unless both of them were tested and be like, yes, they are safe, there is just so many possibilities that could happen with something like that. And Tony Khan was saying, oh, it's one of the best things he ever seen. Okay. But that is the big thing. You may like it, but there may be other people who don't like something like that. And for me, well, it's something I can live with. The problem is, I personally would not do something like that. That is just not me. While it's fine that there needs to be a point with certain things, not just AEW, but in WWE and all these others, about potentially breaking into somebody's house, shooting a promo, throwing a t-shirt onto a baby or whoever is there, and then leaving because you're fearing the police are going to show up. That is the big thing. There needs to be a fine line where it'd be like, okay, this is not a good idea. And for one person to book Dynamite, Rampage, and Collision is not a good idea. Tony Khan needs to have a creative team where they can come up with ideas for Dynamite, for Rampage, for Collision, or have 3 separate creative teams, one for Dynamite, one for Collision, one for Rampage, or do 2. I don't care. That's it's the big thing. You need to have that fine line, because you're going he is slowly but surely pushing away more and more of the AEW crowd than he is bringing in. And the other main problem they're facing as well probably is, what sponsors are going to want to sponsor something with blood drinking spots, all these cursing, bleeding in general, you know, stuff like that. And that is going to be the big thing going forward, because sponsors, when they pay all this money, they expect to see that money come back with people going to the store and buying Slim Jims, buying Snicker bars, buying Coca-Colas, buying Ruffles potato chips, etc. The main problem is, what company is going to put their name out there and do that? Like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game, that's only probably, I say, at least 18 and up or 16 and up. Same with that Chinese video game. I forgot what the name of that is called. And that is the thing. He is pushing AEW more for the hardcore wrestling fans than the standard wrestling fans in general, or, you know, anything in that range. That is going to be one of the big demises for WWE, or for AEW. And then you have the biggest thing in here. How much more can Shad Khan take of this, with constantly, you know, pushing out more money into a project for his son that is maybe not making that much money, if any? That is going to be one of the big things going forward that needs to get looked at. How much can we do? Now, right now, they have started Sting's retirement tour to end at Revolution in March. Great. Here's the problem. That's going to either go one of two ways. It's going to go great, and it's going to have a great payoff, and they'll start, you know, bringing in more fans and stuff like that, or it's going to go terribly. And then you have Ric Flair's woo energy, which I don't have to say anything about that. Go listen to Jim Cornette on Woo Energy. They talk about it more than I can, as far as the ingredients and stuff like that in it. And but that this is going to be the big thing going forward. Sponsors and all this other stuff. There needs to be a fine line to be like, you know, what is acceptable for our audience, what is not acceptable for our audience, and go from there. Because it's going to become a point where potentially AEW becomes like the old WWE as far as attendance wise. I mean, when AEW Dynamite was here on November 1st, apparently they could not even give tickets away to people on the street. That is the sad thing. They used a 22,000 seat arena and could not even have 5,000 people in that arena. Meanwhile, in August or July, on Bray Wyatt's tribute show, they filled that up. Like, there really wasn't hardly any seats left from what you could see. Even the upper floor. Now, was it the whole floor? No. But it was part of it. That is one of the biggest difference. Is WWE could fill up every single seat they had. While AEW, they fill up the hard cam side that shows the ring and then the people behind it, but then they couldn't with behind it. And that is going to be one of the big problems, I think, going forward. How much of that is going to be a loss for them? So I want to hear your opinions. Do you agree with what I say? Do you disagree with what I say? Um, and have you watched AEW recently? If so, what do you think? Have you bought any pay-per-views from AEW? Is it worth it? Um, and what are your thoughts about how like the women's division is booked? How they book certain stars, how they leave certain stars out, and so much more. So I would like to hear what you have to say. Um, any compliments about AEW or any criticizes about AEW is fine. I would just love to hear what you think.